take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
So we have had tons of discussion with some incredible people about mental health. And you get a variety of perspectives and backgrounds on how everyone deals with issues and their own personal journey. Today, however, I'm really happy to have Meenakshi Sharma come on here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan, for having me.
And the reason I'm so excited is one thing I've also wanted to explore with this podcast is, it's not just mental health based. It's kind of, we base it on a lot of different things, but being in that mental health community, I've always wanted to explore, the diversity of people, diversity of, our different backgrounds and where we come from. And we can have those conversations about, all the different things that kind of relate to us and the countries we come from or the religions we practice. So happy to have you on, and your movement, the Lotus Movement. Can you kind of tell us what that's a little bit about and its mission?
Absolutely. So first off, thanks, Ryan, for asking me to come on board with your podcast. I think you're doing an amazing job with bringing together people and talking about issues like mental health. So the Lotus Movement is a mental health movement, and it's primarily targeted to the South Asian community for now. And the reason why the South Asian community, because mental health is still a very taboo topic. And I know generally speaking it is, and we're doing a great job as a society to end the stigma. But I just felt compelled as a South Asian woman who has experienced postpartum anxiety. I didn't feel like I had the resources that I needed, or the actual talking ear, like the listening ears for me to tell them that this is what I've experienced. And I know there's many within our community who are suffering in silence. So I felt it was time to really just start this movement. Originally when I had the plan of launching it, so it was launched in early April. But my plan was to do a lot of in-person interactive style events. Right. But of course, given our global pandemic that we're in right now, I had to switch gears a little bit, right? So everything is digital. I'm using social media platforms. I'm using Instagram. I'm using Facebook. I'm going to be jumping onto Twitter very shortly as well, and creating a website too. And I've decided to create this virtual speaker series. And the purpose behind the virtual speaker series is as if you were sitting at an actual event and you were listening to speakers speak on their experiences with mental health, and explaining to people that they're not alone, that there are relatable issues, that there are resources available to you, and that you do not have to suffer alone. So I have a diverse range of speakers lined up for the upcoming months. And hopefully after that, I'll be able to actually host something in person. But yeah, it's like I said, everything is being done digitally. And it's really, like I said, to start the conversation and raise that awareness. That's the short-term goal there.
Right. So I am curious. It was, when was it? It must have been October or November of last year. I was at a mental health kind of panel and conversation, and a person of color got up to ask a question about what are you specifically doing at the workplace to help people of color when it comes to their mental health. Now that was really kind of like a different perspective for me, because before that, even as a mental health advocate, I didn't really take into account the different kind of experiences and challenges that people of color might experience, especially when it comes to mental health. So what particular challenges, like, why is it different for people of the South Asian, community experiencing mental health? What makes it different? It might present different challenges than, say, a white person, like, straight guy like me.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's a great question, Ryan. So I'll give you a bit of background here. So I've been in touch with the Royal Mental Health Center, and one thing that we've been hearing from the center specifically is that they're having a hard time reaching out to a lot of these marginalized communities because there are barriers, right? There's cultural barriers, there's language barriers. And I think that's where this individual might have been coming from, because we, being people of color, we do have different challenges that we are facing. And because when you play in the cultural and the language stuff, and even the societal stuff is also, it's there, right? A lot of the times people of color, because of the backgrounds they come from, they don't feel like they're empowered to share their stories because there's a lot of judgment. And I mean, I'll share a personal story on my end, having, like I said, experienced postpartum anxiety. You know, I one day did share that with my parents. And, you know, their first question was, well, do you need medication? You know, in a very kind of judgmental way. And then their second point was, oh, you'll be fine. You'll get over it. We did it. You can do it too, right? So there's a lot of this misconception associated with mental health in these marginalized communities. And, you know, the goal with the Lotus Movement and with working with the Royal Foundation or the Royal Mental Health Center is to empower these folks, to get them to understand that they have a place where they can go and speak to people, and they have a support system. And how do we do that? We do that collectively as a community, and we open up and we hear out these individuals.
What is it in particular about, you know, from your experience and you know, having, you know, Indian parents and that being your background, what particular issues like surround that and mental health? You know, like, I mean, there is a lot of older generations even here with us that would have that same mentality. But what are some of the stigmas that wrap around mental health when it comes to like your background and your family and your culture?
Right. So I think there's a lot of, you know, if you come out and say that I'm suffering a mental illness, there's a lot of judgment associated to it. So, you know, people might question, what kind of family is she from? How was she raised? Just a lot of these negative thinking and thoughts. And it's very frustrating, because that's kind of the mentality of, and I'm not trying to, you know, say anything bad about my culture. I love my culture. I love the diversity. I love the values and the beliefs, but it's just the mentality of it that really frustrates me, how people think about, you know, how others are suffering. And it gets to me as well, because like I said, a lot of people are suffering in silence, and a lot of these people are not getting the help that they need. And if they're not getting the help that they need, well, what's happening to our future generations? Right? I know my parents, you know, they immigrated to Canada in the 1970s. They had their own slew of problems and struggles as well. And for them, I think it was more of a survival mode, right? They came to a country, they didn't have much with them. They struggled to find jobs. They struggled to you know, fit into the society and the culture here, the Canadian culture. So they were dealing with their own set of challenges. And did they have a moment to think about their mental health? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it ever crossed their mind. And that's something that I'm also like trying to understand, is the generational issues behind the mental health piece within the South Asian community. And that's something that I've hope to include in the speaker series that I have launched, and actually hear from you know, psychologists and therapists, and understand what did they go through, and why were they not open about it, or did they have the right resources at the time? Because for them, it was just like, it was survival mode. It was power mode. It was go, and having kids, and then integrating your kids into the society and the culture. It was just a lot, right? It was a lot going on. So being the first generation, we're finally at that point where we understand that we can talk about our issues, right? But we have to do it without this like judgment bubble that's sitting on our shoulders, right?
Right. Do you know, like, I mean, mental health resources are so kind of finite and limited as they are. Has there, and I don't know if you know the answer, so if you don't, it's okay, but do you know if there's been a lot of study or effort or research into what you were talking about, to understanding kind of that gap that they might have experienced, especially when it comes to, we talk about, immigration, coming to a new country and trying to, assimilate into their culture. And especially back then when it wasn't quite as, come in and be yourself. It was come in and change to what Canadians, I use air quotes, expect you to be. Has there been effort into studying that impact or understanding the impact of what that did?
So I'll give a very general answer because I don't want to speak to something that I'm not sure is happening or not. But through my research for finding speakers for my speaker series, I've been noticing a lot coming out of the UK. There's a lot of psychologists and therapists who are looking into these issues of like the generational pieces, right, when it comes to mental health. I haven't seen much here in Canada. I know there are some local South Asian women actually who are working with the Royal Mental Health Center on studies, but I'm not sure it's specific to this generational piece. I think it's more of like what goes through our minds and studying the brain and
right.
that sort of thing. So yeah.
I'm curious, and like, please educate me as much as you want on this, because I make this, it's a joke, but like it's true on this podcast a lot, is I'm from like a small, almost purely white town when I was growing up. So until now, I haven't had a lot of, I'm just starting to learn about all these different cultures and people and backgrounds and stuff, right? You come from a limited view and you start learning. Yeah. So I'm curious on the effects that maybe the culture plays on gender roles, especially when it pertains to India, and again, I don't want to speak off terms, so please feel free to correct me on anything, but like kind of like arranged marriages. As you can tell, I'm trying to dance around everything very softly because I don't want to, be ignorant or anything. But arranged marriages, or the husband-wife relationship. How does that play a big effect on mental health and everything in your experience?
100%, 100%. I mean, yes, India is slowly starting to westernize in some cities, but in a lot of cities, especially in the smaller villages, I mean, there's still talk of arranged marriages and human trafficking as well, child marriages. There's still a lot, and even just boys having more precedence over girls. It's still, these are common problems still. And it's not just, I wouldn't say it's just an Indian problem. It's definitely a global problem. There are, it happens in the Western countries as well, right? Where we do experience or hear of stories of human trafficking and sex trafficking and that sort of thing. And it's interesting too, because I am having someone who will be speaking on the effects of mental health when it comes to domestic abuse and violence within the community, right? Because even then we don't, like, divorce is again another taboo topic amongst many others in the community. We don't speak about divorce. If you are having problems in your marital relationship, you deal with it, you put up with it, right? Irrespective of how one is treating the other, because men and women are equally susceptible to any sort of discrimination and abuse and whatnot. So yes, all of these different issues definitely have a big role on your mental health, and that's a part of the problem that needs to be spoken about, right? And so maybe with this piece on mental health, I'm hoping that we as a community and as a society, we can understand that all these these layering issues that are almost like the behind the scenes issues, that they also start coming out, right? That it's okay to talk about divorce. It's okay to talk about our sexual problems. It's okay to talk about relationship issues. We are human. We are all human, right? And we are all equally, exposed and can have all these emotions and feelings in our lives, right? So I hope that answered your
Do you have a perspective on perhaps why all these things get pushed to the back burner? Is it is it a religious thing? Is it just more of like a shame, embarrassment thing? Kind of like that feeling like this is the way it is and it's the way it has to be, kind of that societal stubbornness.
Yeah.
What is it that maybe a combination? I don't know, but what's kind of like the reason that things get so held up?
I think it's just this notion of like, reputation is a big thing in our community. Status, it's really hard because it comes from many years of build up, right? And now I feel like my generation, and I'm hoping that the future generation, we're really trying to break down these societal norms, the way that we've been told that we should be acting. I mean, even as a woman, it's always been that, South Asian women are supposed to, look after their husbands and take care of the children and watch, take care of the household. And these things need to change. This narrative needs to change, right? It was always told that we had to live this linear life of you go to school, you get an education, you get married, you have kids, and that is your life. But there's more to it than that, right?
Yeah.
And that's been my journey is trying to always continuously break down these barriers, because I now have 2 little girls and I want to make sure that their future is different. It's different than what our society once told us it should be.
Right. What's the resistance like for you? Is it like when you're talking to your parents or family, friends, especially when it comes to the older generation, how much resistance do you get? I guess what the question is like, how much of a challenge might this be for you?
I definitely foresee this being a challenging movement, and I can already kind of sense it because just from launching it, it's not something that's going to gain momentum right away, right? Because again, it's a taboo topic and no one really wants to talk about it, because I think it does bring out other issues as well. So it's definitely been hard with gaining that momentum, but I've been just kind of, tagging people and cold calling people and calling people out and just saying, hey, have you heard of the Lotus Movement? Hey, can you please share it? And maybe, someone brought this up to me, and it was a very good point that don't expect that initial like, wow, let's all jump on board, because like I said, it's a hard topic to be speaking about. And also a lot of people might not feel comfortable yet, right? They might just see that, okay, there is finally something here. Okay, I don't want to fully come on out and share my experience because I'm not there yet. And I can appreciate that, right? Like I'm not expecting like, 1,000 likes on this page or anything like that. What I am expecting is that we realize that that there is something here for people, and that we can work together to lean on each other and empower one another and share our stories, and that these stories are shared in a safe space, that they're not going to be judged, or they're not going to be scrutinized for sharing their emotions.
Right. Yeah. It makes me think of a thing like Bell Let's Talk, which aside from all the corporate stuff, like whatever, but when that started, and that was behind a huge media corporation,
right,
and with all the advertising and everything in a while, it still took, 3, 4, 5 years to really get to a point where you started to notice the conversation changing. But with that being said, there are still, a ton of people who suffer in silence, who aren't comfortable sharing how they feel. Since I've been speaking, like, I wouldn't have to be speaking about it in front of people, or if people weren't still scared to talk about it or even understand it. I think that's another big thing is, what is, we all have mental health. We all experience some sort of anxiety, some sort of depression, but what's the point of this is something temporary, or this might be an issue, right? Like that kind of tightrope that you're walking, it's even hard to understand for people who are in it, like me, like yourself. I often think, I'm involved. I have medication, I therapy, all this stuff. And then there's still things where I'm like, is it normal for me to be thinking about this? I don't know. So there's a huge educational component that has to go along with it. So, you know, is that also a big part of your kind of movement? Like, it's one thing to have that personal speaker talk about their story and people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel that way. But it's getting psychologists, getting, you know, sociologists, all these people who just understand it so much better. Is that going to be a big part of the movement?
Absolutely. That's the goal, is to have a variety of guest speakers. And like I said, I've reached out to a lot of people. That's the good thing too, is that yes, we're in this pandemic, but social media has been such a powerful tool at the moment to connect with people, because I don't know if, you know, truthfully, this was, you know, forget about COVID, forget if we were in this situation and I was actually hosting an in-person event, I'm not sure I would have been able to secure like a diverse range of guest speakers, because I would have probably just remained in my bubble and stuck with that bubble. But, you know, the power of social media at the moment is just amazing. So with that, I have been able to connect with people globally, and I have people from the States. I have people from across the country as well, like people out of Vancouver. I have people in the UK who are psychologists, they're therapists, psychotherapists as well, who are so willing to come forward and share. You know, they can't necessarily give that medical advice, of course, because they have to be careful of their licensing and you know, restrictions there, but they are able to share in a general perspective that, you know, these are the signs, are the telling signs. These are the resources that are available to you. And then ultimately just sharing as well their piece on, you know, what made them become a psychologist, what made them become a psychotherapist, and so on and so forth, and professionals in their field, right? And then I also had from the UK, he goes by the name of Sikh Dad. He's a dad to 4 kids, and he recently was one of my guest speakers, and he shared, there's just, oh my God, Ryan, there's so many thoughts that I'm just like, where do I even begin? Because it's just, I'm so blown away by the response of how willing people are to share their stories. And he's a man, he came out and he poured his heart out. And then he sent me a message afterwards and he said, I've never shared that much detail, but I felt it was the right thing to do. And I felt empowered to do it. And that, honestly, that like, it humbled me so much, because not only is this helping the public, it's also helping these guest speakers share their piece as well. And I also, like, I struggle with actually sharing my full story, because I'm not there yet. I'm not, I haven't reached that moment in my life where I'm comfortable to share my story. But listening to these guest speakers and, you know, them coming back with, you know, positive responses to me, it just gives me that hope and that ray of light that, you know what, if they can do it, I know I can get there as well. And one day I will be able to share my story. So it's so powerful at the moment.
Yeah, that's an important thing. You know, as a speaker, I find, you know, I reached a point where I felt comfortable sharing my story publicly. It took me like three years from the point of kind of like the lowest point to getting to a point of sharing it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I always say when you share your story, it's like a weight gets lifted off your shoulders.
Yeah.
But it's also always important to know, because, you know, if I share something that's very intimate or personal to me, people, you know, will kind of message me privately and be like, you know, like, I wish I had the courage to maybe share something about me. And I always say to people, it's like the courage doesn't come from sharing it publicly. You don't ever have to share it publicly if you don't want to. That it's about just talking to somebody, whether that's a professional, a friend, a parent, your partner, whoever. Like, you don't have to go on Twitter or YouTube or make a podcast. Like, that's not what it's all about. And that's why, you know, when I speak to teens, that's what it is too. You don't have to get up here and tell everybody about it, but don't keep it in, like you were saying earlier. Like, it's important that you share and start getting it out to people that can help.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one thing that I am guilty of, that for the longest time I was bottling up a lot of the feelings. And then it just came to a point where I recognized that I needed help, and I needed to do something about it. And that's also a key message, right? Is to don't suppress those thoughts. Don't just brush them away, because they do catch up to you at some point.
Yeah. And, no doubt about it. It's so hard. It takes a lot to make yourself vulnerable like that.
Yeah.
Let your guard down, and let kind of like almost maybe the most personal details of your life with somebody. Like don't get me wrong, you tell people to talk all the time, but like it's not easy, and you always want to emphasize that point as well. I'm curious, and I've only had the chance to ask this question a few times, but I would like to know, from your perspective, what the impact of racism and stereotyping and all those different things, what role does that, like, how deeply impactful is that on mental health of people who experience it? Because that term gets thrown around a lot lately, and justly so. Of course, there's a lot of it going on, whether that's institutionally or on social media. But I don't think people really understand the impact that it has on the people experiencing it firsthand. Can you just share a little bit, like, it doesn't have to be a story or personal experience, but maybe things you've heard about it and how it affects people?
Yeah, that's a very it's a sensitive one, right? Because let's be real, there's systemic racism is still very much prevalent in our society. And growing up, I'll share a little bit actually of a personal take on this. So growing up, I grew up in a very I was the only colored student really in my elementary school. So no one really understood like why my mom had to put oil in my hair every night, or why I wasn't allowed to wear nail polish or makeup, or why I wasn't allowed to go for sleepovers. And so at the time, obviously, like, you feel like you're just going through the normal kid things, right? And you have to like fight with your parents and, explain to them why you want to go to so-and-so's house or so-and-so's birthday. And at the time, that's what I thought it was. But I think what I realized is that I'd sometimes as a kid, I would get bullied in that sense, right? Because they would always pick on me on like, well, why are you dressed that way? Or why do you smell that way? Why do you always smell like curry? Right? Like that was a common a common comment. And I can joke about it now, of course, but at the time, like as a kid, like it hits you hard, and you do hold on to a lot of these negative memories because let's be real, like that's the childhood I grew up in, right? And I couldn't go to my parents and say, hey, like so-and-so picked on me for the fact that I was wearing like a traditional outfit to school or whatnot, right? And I mean, I have to give it to my parents. Like my mom's always been that advocate to like promote your culture, promote where you come from, be proud of it, which is all great. But then it had an impact on me. It had an impact on my mental health. It had an impact on, the person that I am today. I've come to terms that I can get over, and let go of a lot of that. But in that moment, it definitely played an impact on my mental health. And it comes down to what kids are dealing with today too, right? I mean, there's still bullying happening. There's still discrimination happening. And this does take a toll on this, future generations' mental health. And we need to give them those right resources and those right tools and empowering it. It always comes down to empowering them that they can do more, and that that they will get out of it, right? And that there are people to help them to get out of it.
Yeah. I'm also curious, how much does that, I know you said you let it go, but truly, how much does it get carried with you as you grow up and into an adult woman and starting your life and your family? I know it's going to be different for everybody, but I am curious, like as a child, like it's just things you don't understand, and the bullying, and you know, it's just different, right?
Yeah.
The people like to pick out differences, but the long lasting impact, you know, how much does it impact the rest of your life? Does it, like, you know what I mean? Like, does it make you more cautious? Is there maybe something that like, you know, maybe might be triggering, and you're like, like, I remember this stupid asshole Jerry said that thing about me, you know, just not to make light of the topic, but I'm just curious how much gets carried on and that you hold on to, whether consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just it, right? Like now I can, you know, quote unquote joke about it, right? Like I said at the time, could I do that? No. It took me many years to get to that point. But then I think I also took a direction where, you know, once high school came and I was in more of like a multicultural, I guess, setting, environment, I found my brown clique, right? So I just kind of stayed with my brown clique. And then we all kind of understood each other that, you know, it's okay to smell like curry and your jacket smell this way. But I do kind of get those like weird flashbacks because like now when I cook, I make sure that I put my jackets away in the closet so that I don't have that in my mind that, okay, if I go to work and people are going to smell, like it's going to be awkward, and, you know, just like little things like that. But I just wonder too, is that a me issue, or is that like a cultural issue, or do others, you know, other people of color experience that, or Caucasian people experience that? Like, you know, it's like I said, we definitely have progressed as a society, and we're open to cultures and the different, you know, the different traditions that people, you know, are believing in, but that systemic racism is still very much there, right? And so we just kind of work really hard to change those narratives and to educate, right? That's also another thing. So anytime there would be like a festival. So like Diwali, for example, that's a festival of lights. It's like our new year, right? And you're supposed to wear new clothes. You're supposed to, you know, do certain prayers and whatnot. And I was very like shy and timid about it in school. Like I wouldn't really talk about it. I just like, I'd go to school like as if it was a normal day. But, you know, now that I think back, I'm like, but, you know, why was I so shy about it? Why was I not proud about it? Like, you know, if I could celebrate Christmas really proudly, why couldn't I celebrate Diwali proudly, right? So now what I do is whenever, you know, there's a big festivity or a big, you know, celebration, I'll go purchase some Indian sweets and I'll go into work that day and I'll say, hey, guess what? It's Diwali, guys. Let's all dig in and you know, eat some amazing Indian sweets. And so I'm just like, I'm embracing it now, right? And I think, like I said, it took me a while to get there. I had to let go of a lot of things. I had to let go of these like these thoughts that were just consuming me that I realized are not important if I want to truly be that driver and change to, you know, one step closer to get us to that one step closer to end this systemic racism. Then I have to embrace it myself, and I have to be that that catalyst to educate people, right? So so yeah, so it's come to that.
Right. I always like, I wish people felt comfortable to share it more, because I love, you know, seeing it, because again, like I have no clue. Like unfortunately, I'm uneducated in a lot of subjects, and, you know, that's a big reason why I have the podcast, so I can learn about all these things. You know, part of it is, you know, just my own kind of ignorance of not exploring everything. But like, I love that now, you know, growing up from what we were talking about to now, where you come in and you know, spread it around the workplace. Like, you know, that's fun. That's fun. I am curious. So when it comes to stereotypes, and especially when it comes to Indian stereotypes, you know, I think of Apu from The Simpsons, right? Like
that was the first character that came to mind.
The iconic one, you know.
Yeah.
What is that? That's a good question. Is what's the impact of stereotypes, and especially when it comes to those types of stereotypes? Because I think a lot of people always kind of categorize, especially South Asian communities, that they're working at the corner stores, at the gas stations, at, you know, I mean, in some cases, they're frontline workers. If we're talking about now, there's a lot that become frontline workers. And funny enough, they never got respect until now, when everyone's like, oh, wow, they actually are really important, right?
I know.
You know, is there a lot of like talk about that amongst your community, like about those stereotypes and how harmful they are? Just kind of maybe shed some light on that, just so to help people understand it.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of, stereotypes out there that, you know, we need to do better at breaking, because let's take this example. You have someone who's a qualified engineer, doctor, lawyer, whatever it might be in India, who comes to a country like, you know, one of the Western countries, tries to integrate into the society, but doesn't fit into the credentials that this Western country has put out there. So what does this individual do? Well, they resort, because it's survival mode, right? They have families, they have to sustain their lifestyle. So what do? They become those frontline workers, right? They are taxi drivers. They are bus drivers. They are those who are, you know, potentially even working at the Tim Hortons, at the McDonald's, right? They're doing something else aside from what they've been qualified for and what they've worked so hard for. And I know it because I've seen it within my own family, right? My dad, he had done his BCom in India, in New Delhi. And when he immigrated here to Canada, he couldn't find a job because no one would, quote unquote, believe his credential, or they wouldn't take it seriously, you know, because it wasn't a credential. He didn't go to a post-secondary institution here in one of the Western countries. So it was hard, right? So he did have to work these different jobs, and he did drive a bus for X amount of years. And then, you know, he, like many others, realized that, okay, in order to get our professions that we you know, are that we've worked hard for, that in our other countries, he did go back to school here, and he did, you know, find a job eventually that fit his profession. And so, you know, when you see it in shows like The Simpsons, and you see it in a lot of movies sometimes, that, oh, there's a cab driver and he's either like of a South Asian descent and he's got an accent and whatever. It's just kind of like they degrade these people, right? Like, we're not just taxi drivers. We're not just, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you know, there's nothing wrong with driving a taxi, but also don't stereotype, you know, people from the South Asian diaspora to be these people, because we're more than that, right? Like, there's some amazing people who are running some amazing companies at the moment who are successful South Asian people, right? So that's a work in progress for sure. Yeah.
And thank you for bringing that point up about your dad, because that's, you know, that's so true. And a lot of people forget that fact of when, you know, people like immigrate, that, you know, they have, you know, they're doctors, they're economists, they have like these prestigious degrees and come here. And like you said about your dad, he had to start all over, like literally, all that hard work. And then you have to start all over.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that changing a little bit now? Like, I really don't know. When, you know, people, how much more accepting of those credentials, has it changed at all? It definitely
has. I think it's definitely gotten better. And I can see that because like, I'm in a bunch of these Facebook groups, and it's like the Indian community in Ottawa, or the Indian community in Toronto, and there's just all these postings continuously about like private companies hiring, you know, IT professionals out of India, or you know, business professionals and accountants and whatnot. Yes, they do have to come here and, you know, do a testing of some sort to make sure that they can practice here, but I am definitely seeing the shift. And it also helps too that I think Canada is accepting a lot of international students here, right? So there are a lot of international students coming to Canada who are, you know, hoping to diversify their professions and, you know, join the society here and give back to the society here. So there's definitely a shift happening. I think we've made progression in that sense, but also it's just, it's hard on the previous generation who had to work so hard to get to where they are at today. But then it's rewarding, right, to see that the change is happening.
Mm-hmm. Shifting topics a little bit, I'm just curious, and I don't know if you have any insight on it, but I'm curious on the views of LGBTQ people, mental health, and when that comes to the South Asian community. Is it more accepting? Is it kind of on par? Because that just kind of adds another layer to when we're talking about mental health. Like that's, would you say it's better? It's a little bit worse. It's complicated.
Definitely complicated. Again, because if you identify as a member of the LGBTQ community, it's not very accepting within the community, right? So again, only recently, I think, do people realize that you can identify differently, but I think it goes down to a household opinion, right? How do different households accept this? It's interesting because there's this show currently airing on Bravo. It's called Family Karma, and it's a reality TV show based on South Asian families in Miami. And so think of like the Real Housewives, or think of like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So that style. And in that show, they are talking about different topics that normally would be very hush hush, right? Within the South Asian community. They're talking about sexual relationships. They're talking about LGBTQ community. There's one individual on that show, his parents have fully accepted that he's gay, and that he has a partner who they'll be getting married, they'll probably settle down, and his parents have full on accepted it. And so it was almost like, it was really refreshing when I was watching this episode that, wow, there are finally families who are accepting of this, right? Because just imagine the mental load on that individual who has to tell his parents, right? Like I feel for him. I know exactly what he's going through, right? There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of anxiety. And even, from my own experience, so I married a man outside of my culture, out of my community, right? So I married a French Canadian, a Caucasian man. And even I remember that day when I had to I didn't have to, but I came out and told my parents that, hey, guess what? I'm dating a white man. I was just like, I was so scared. I didn't know how they would react. I didn't know what their thoughts would be, what their questions would be, like if they would tell me to end the relationship ASAP. You know what I mean? It's just, there was just so many thoughts. So I can appreciate when people are finally coming out and they are expressing who they truly are. And then I see the families just reciprocating and becoming so understanding and accepting of who we really are.
So I had this conversation on the last episode about representation.
Yes.
So I guess you would agree that talking about the show on Bravo, and now it's kind of bringing some of these issues to more of a mainstream audience. So people who might be suppressing things or feeling things can be like, oh, like I see this on TV, like, okay, so it's normal.
Yeah.
So I guess you can speak to the importance of proper and, intelligent representation of real life and what that does for people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, representation matters, right? And I'm so glad that these conversations are coming up finally, right? I think they were always just kind of like under the rug. Yeah. Sure, we'll add a minority, like a visible minority to the mix to make ourselves look like we're inclusive. But no, now that's changing, right? Like there is real inclusion happening and representing all diversities and ethnic backgrounds. And so I really do appreciate, sometimes the show is really extra though, I have to admit. So just like any sort of reality TV show. Yeah. But at least they are touching on some topics that normally we as a community would not touch on.
Yeah. It's just, you think about it. And when I think about when I growing up understanding Indian culture, like other than those stereotypes, there wasn't much, even though India has a very successful, Bollywood, that billion-dollar industries of movies and shows and icons and celebrities that like pretty much never cross over, with the exception of, I would say, until Slumdog Millionaire. Now I could be wrong on that, but that was like really kind of like the only crossover of culture into, I guess, Western society, which is really strange considering the success and the power that it has.
That's right. Yeah, no, for sure. And like India, like, yes, there's Bollywood, and I mean, it's also quite a booming economy too, right? So it's interesting that, yes, Slumdog was the one that gave, I think, attention to India and Bollywood and the industry itself. But I think also like there were different, movies that were just kind of they were there. They were probably not getting the attention that they deserved. I think I can't even date back to what year the Oscars were when this movie came out. It's called Lagan, and it was all about a cricket match, and it was nominated in the best foreign category for the Oscars. And I think it might have had to been like 99, almost 98, 99. So I mean, there's been a couple of instances of, yes, that sort of branching out to the Western society and the Western culture. And I think, recently a good example is Priyanka Chopra and Nick Jonas, right? Them getting married and settling down together, and never, no one probably ever would have thought that, because, Priyanka was so immersed in the Bollywood scene, and she still is. They never would have seen this connection, but it's happened, and everyone's okay with it. Like I'm sure there probably were some critics out there, but this is life. This is how we're evolving as a society, right? Globally, we are connecting with other people, and we are integrating our cultures and into different societies, right?
No, and it's a good point. It's happening slowly and a lot slower than a lot of people would like. It's happening. Which I think is great, because it gives an opportunity to learn and understand and kind of dismantle some of those prejudices or unconscious biases.
That's right.
That you have. I remember talking on my last podcast. When my brother came out, it was a number of years ago now, but at the time. And I was a hockey player, using the F word or saying that's gay was very, like that was just something like a normal part of the vocabulary. And it wasn't until him like calling it out a couple times where then you could start to think about it, and then you would catch yourself. And now like there's never even an inclination, even though I would almost say it all the time. After, a couple months, like you don't even, it never comes out. But a lot of the time you just need to be like told that's not okay. That's harmful. That you're being an idiot. And then if you're a decent person, which hopefully you are, you start to, you pick it up, but you kind of need that push of, of people like just telling you and bringing it to your attention and awareness. And then you can, start to dismantle everything.
Absolutely.
What are some of the speaking events you have coming up? Who do you have scheduled? What's coming up? Because I'm very curious to hear some of your speakers and guests.
Yeah, for sure. So this Friday, actually, so tomorrow, well, I'm not sure what that date would be. But anyways, whatever date it is.
What day is it? I don't even know.
I'm so mixed up with my days. And I have a mom from Toronto, actually. She's a blogger and a writer for a big digital newspaper. So she's going to be featured, my next guest feature. And she's coming out with a different take on it, because she's actually a mom who hasn't personally experienced any form of mental health issues, but she's talking about the importance of how as parents we need to equip ourselves with the right strategies and the right tools and resources, so that if one day our kids do come to us and tell us that they are having issues, because she's got older children, so who are going to be starting university, and that's, you know, a common, sometimes a common place, right, where kids are experiencing various forms of anxiety and depression.
Right. And teenage is messy anyway.
Exactly, right? And so add in that extra layer of like university, it's definitely, it can be a trying time, right? So, so she's going to be sharing her take on that. And then going forward, I have a couple of local individuals who have agreed to speak about their personal experiences. I have one, she's a good friend of mine. She's actually my personal trainer. So no bias there to promote her or anything, but she's going to be speaking on the importance of mental health and fitness and how that relates, right? Because a lot of the times, yes, you know, it's important to hear out our mental health, but what sort of coping mechanisms can we use to keep ourselves, you know, I wouldn't say like in that right mindset, but at least help us to get to where we need to get to, right? And that was one thing with me when I was experiencing a lot of the postpartum anxiety. I went to her and I said, hey, look, I need something that's going to help my mental health. And she said, let's start training. And believe it or not, with the training, I actually did feel a lot better because I was letting out a lot of frustrations through training. I was talking to her through training, right? She became my listening ear. She was there for me. She would hear me out on anything that I was sort of feeling. She'd help me out. So it was very therapeutic. And so she'll be speaking as well. And then in terms of actual professionals, like I said, I have a few from the UK. Like I have a psychotherapist lined up in the next few weeks. I have a poet actually who's going to be, she uses her poetry to express her thoughts and make relations between mental health. And so, like I said, just a diverse range of speakers. And it's just been amazing because anyone I've reached out to has not said no. No one's declined to participate. Everyone's been very open. And I also want to stress that, yes, this movement is for the South Asian community, but my speakers are actually, they're not all South Asian. I have different, speakers from different backgrounds who are coming out and sharing their experiences, because I think one thing that we all need to recognize is that mental health does not discriminate. It is a global issue, and it's something that we need to talk about collectively.
Absolutely. That's huge. And I love that you're touching on all those subjects, because that's, you know, things I've covered a lot and had a lot of conversations about with people. And I know from personal experience, you know, exercise is huge for me. And I'm not someone who, I mean, I've learned to like it now after a couple of years, but like working out and exercise has never really come natural to me.
For sure.
I don't like necessarily going for runs, and you know, I like the feeling of lifting weights afterwards, but during it, it's like I'm not one of those people who's just like, I love going to the gym. But I do it because I just recognize the benefits. And I always tell people who are experiencing any form of anxiety or, you know, depression's a little bit different because it can screw with you, but especially with anxiety, the things you can do immediately is work on your diet and get some sort of physical activity, whether that's lifting weights, whether that's going for a run. It could just be a walk. It could just be some push-ups. It could just be some jumping, you know, playing basketball. I think that's also a very big misconception when it comes to fitness and mental health, where it's like, well, I don't want to go to the gym. Like, you don't have to. You can do all sorts of different things, and it's going to help. And, you know, there's scientific reasons, there's personal reasons. It did lead me to a question though, because I'm very curious how much gets translated over into, you know, this communities and cultures that encompass, you know, South Asia, you know, in the Western world, when we talk about mental health and things you can do. So exercise, you know, is that a big thing? Mindfulness, you know, that's another thing that's really emerging in mental health here in Western culture. Like, do those things transfer over, those kind of more organic, natural approaches to mental health instead of just, taking pills and going to therapy? Like, does that translate over? Do people practice that? Is it common?
Yeah, we're seeing more of it now, I find. And this is, again, like, this is purely my opinion, but
Mhm.
I mean, even when I started training, I kind of got questioned, like, are you sure you want to be lifting these weights? And I said, yeah, because I need it. I don't need it just for my strength. I need it for my mental state. Right. So, but I think that misconception is changing. I think people are realizing, especially when you see, like, big icons and celebrities who are using fitness to not only, build strength and resistance, but also for their betterment of their mental state, that mindset's shifting for sure. And I think another thing too, this mindfulness concept, like Reiki and yoga and meditation, a lot of that does come from the South Asian culture, right? So
Right.
we've already kind of been immersed in that. So those concepts are not really new to us. I think what's new is how we're integrating it now into our daily lives and actually understanding the true importance and significance to doing these practices. But like, even for myself, like, I never would have thought meditation, I thought meditation was something more that, people do during, like, spirituality sessions and whatnot. But actually meditation is something you can quickly do, like, first thing in the morning, right? Just take 5 minutes to yourself to just calm yourself and get yourself ready and set the tone for the day. And journaling too is another one that I never used to believe in, because I thought, like, oh my God, like, who has time to journal, right? But when you truly educate yourself and you explore the different resources that are out there and you see how much of an impact they're having on other people, I think you truly open your eyes and appreciate the importance of these resources and tools that are there.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, because that's following the exact kind of themes of my last few episodes, which has been with, like, a counselor. I had a PhD and professional athlete talk about mindfulness. So the last couple of episodes, especially when we transition to this COVID world, I love that you're reiterating the facts that other people are attesting to that have worked, because journaling would never know I'd have a podcast or work in radio. Like, that's something that came up a few episodes ago and something I've been recently trying and exploring in, and to just dump those thoughts in your head and just put them on paper, and whether it's a coherent manner or an incoherent manner, just
jotting them down.
How therapeutic just the practice is, not necessarily even looking at the benefits of dissecting your thoughts and following patterns and really thinking about what you're thinking about, that mindfulness practice, but just a therapeutic of just, like,
yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's true. Just, like, let it out, right? And that's one thing that I've realized, especially since becoming a mom. So I'm a mom of two. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but mom of two. So, as a mom, you're just like, there's a million different thoughts going through your mind all day, every day. Even when I go to bed, my mind I feel like it never shuts off. Right. And so, I started to write. So I started a blog, and then I started doing more videos and, vlogging, and this became my outlet. It became my outlet to express what was in my mind, and also, connect with other parents too and hear from them. Right. And it became also an outlet for them to share what was on their mind. So that's kind of been, like, my therapy in all of this, and motherhood, I guess you could say, is just having this outlet and platform available for when I needed to share my thoughts. And it's definitely been helpful, because there's only so much my poor husband can hear from from me day in, day out, right? And there's only so many coffee dates you can go on with other moms and play dates and that sort of thing. Like, we all talk about, like, did your kid poop today? How did they eat today? Right. But there's a whole other component to motherhood. Right. And the worrying never ends. The thinking never ends. So that's been a very helpful therapy for me.
Yeah. I feel that's what this podcast is kind of turned into for me a little bit, where I'm not necessarily, like, putting my thoughts out on my own, but, like, going through a journey of talking with someone and learning from them and hearing their stories and their perspective, and kind of like sharing my own, and how things change and are fluid. Like that's definitely kind of like the form that it's took for me, and why I appreciate it, to just get things out in the open and tackle subjects that I'm thinking about, or just having a change of perspective on certain things that I might not have before. And that's what I kind of love about, that's one of the best things about the internet.
That's right.
Honestly, you have all the crap with the trolls and the news and Trump and blah, 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 blah. But like, if it wasn't for the internet, we wouldn't have been connected to have this conversation and, move forward with the projects that we'll continue to work on, hopefully. But it's been a great outlet, and even for mental health, for sure.
Absolutely. Yes. I couldn't agree more.
So if people want more information, where can they find you? Where can they find these speaker series if they want to sign up and get involved?
That's right. So it's all open. I've left it open concept. So you can find us on Instagram, just in the search bar, put in @the Lotus Movement, and on Facebook as well. And with all the speakers, I've been uploading them onto IGTV. So I've been using Instagram to showcase these speakers for now. Again, because I'm hoping this is the short-term plan at the moment. So everyone's open to view these speakers and share their opinions. I'm always open to talking more as well. If anyone has any questions, or if they want to learn more about the Lotus Movement, definitely just send me a DM through Instagram. And hopefully I will have that website up and running too. That's on my to-do list. And then all the videos from the speakers will also be placed on the website.
That's awesome. So the Lotus Movement, check them out. Going to be some awesome stuff coming. Can't wait to go take a look. Meenakshi, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate this so much. Like I said earlier, you're doing an amazing job connecting people and allowing us to have these conversations with you.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. Thank you very much.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.